Now again, my opponent is trying to gambit pawns here. I don't think this is the Icelandic gambit. This is still just some kind of gambit within a Scandinavian. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to confuse him by gambiting back. He doesn't want to have the pawn. He's not interested. Well, what can I do? All I can do, guys, is put pawns on pre and see what happens. Well, I have an idea here. Is it a good idea? Well, that remains to be seen. I'm going to castle queenside and mate him. That's the long and the short of it. So if you look at where my pieces are, bishop on c2, bishop on c4 and b2 pointing down to the king side, knight on g5, knight on c3, all aggressively placed. Which means that after he goes h6, I'm obviously not interested in moving that knight away from its aggressive place. Now is he going to go b5? I'm trying to buy time for myself to play knight takes e4. After which I think my attack will be incredibly dangerous. So he does play this b5 move. I'm going to take on e4 anyway, because I am hitting the knight on d4. And this is building to a kind of important moment very, very quickly here. So, for example, b takes c4. Okay, that's the move played. A lot of options here. I can take on f6 or d4 first. But I think what we're going to do is we're going to... Ooh, bishop takes d4, knight takes, queen takes, bishop a3, king. Okay, I'm not getting mated. An important idea here is knight takes e4, queen takes e4, hits mate on h7 and the rook on a8. However, annoyingly, he's going to have moves like bishop a3 check, king b1, rook b8, getting the rook out of attack with gain of tempo. And it looks like he's just doing that idea first. So bishop a3, king b1. I could have played queen takes a3 there, but then the bishop on d4 goes, so wasn't interested in that. Rook b8, king a1. Material at the moment is level because we've both gambited some pawns here. H takes g5. I think I'm recapturing h takes g5 and then just attempting a simple mate down the back rank. This is tense. My opponent is down to a minute 10 against a minute 45. And he has a tough job holding off a mate. Can you guys see a good move for black here? There isn't anything obvious that stands out to me. Pawn to c3. Very interesting move based on trying to get b2. But I'm going to go bishop takes and simply defend against that threat. In the meantime, I still have all of my own threats, including taking on f6, followed by a devastating attack on the h-file or on h7 itself with the knight on g5. So, knight comes to d5. Feels like I am oh so close to a win here, but then again so is my opponent. Queen d3 sets up a little cheapo. Can you see the cheapo here, guys? Will my opponent see the cheapo? He plays knight takes c3. I can recapture in 1, 2, 3 different ways, but then he's got bishop b2 check. Have I overlooked something here? Well, I have this knight f6 check, and now with the knight not on d5, he can't recapture with a knight covering the important h7 square, so I think that is game over. King h8, queen h7 mate, and whichever way he recaptures on f6 is also going to be mate. So there's nothing left to do here but to either take the knight or resign. And my opponent is looking in disbelief here. Plays queen takes f6. He has so many strong moves. But checkmate comes. And that's the end of the game. He says GG. Ooh. And I'm going to type that to him. And let's see who we have as the next challenger. We have Scottheim 2 from Norway. Playing 1e4. Okay, I'm going to try another e5. got some interesting gambits in mind. Let us try an elephant gambit. Not the world's most popular gambit, perhaps, but gonna see how it goes. My opponent again seems determined to gambit the pawn back, giving me e4, transposing into some kind of Petrov. But we are not interested in that. We just do not want to take that off. Bishop up to b5 check. Got to block that. Let's block it with a knight. Maybe he now has to watch out for queen a5 check in some variations, but okay, he castles and sidesteps that. Well, we're going to have to take that pawn off on e4. It's just getting a little bit ridiculous at that stage. Don't worry, we will still find a moment to gambit in this game. We just might have to wait that a little bit longer. One idea I'm already eyeing up is a potential Greek gift sacrifice on h2 after his knight eventually takes on d7. So keep an eye out for that. However, he's probably taking it this way, which means my queen is going to be misplaced for that. But it does allow me the option of castling on the queen's side, and I'm just disappointed because of the queens getting swapped off here. How do I keep the queens on, guys? How do I keep the queens on? Well, I'm desperately looking at bishop takes h2, queen c7 check. And it's so bad. It's just so bad. I was going to say I'm going to ask my opponent nicely to leave the queens on the board, but unfortunately he's disabled chat. So I'm afraid, guys, what we're going to have here is some kind of ending where I do have a tiny edge due to this pawn on e4. I'm threatening to double his pawns with bishop takes c3 here, but he does spot that. And in actual fact, I'm going to take back my slight advantage and say white is completely okay here. In fact, after rook a d1, I'm a little bit uncomfortable with my position. Don't know how I hold equality here. King c7, king c6 holds things together just about. But for example, bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, rook takes e4, bishop takes c3, rook takes e8, rook takes... Okay, the one thing in my favour here is that in all of these endings, my king is far more actively placed than my opponent. Now, most of the game, you don't want your king to be active, but as soon as there are few enough pieces on the board for checkmate to not be an issue any longer, you want your king as active as possible. And now you can see my king is coming up, attempting to hopefully munch a few of my opponent's pawns. Also, I'm going to try and keep my opponent's rook as passive as possible here. So let's see if I can potentially grind out this rook and pawn ending from a pawn behind. Almost anything could happen here. Let's see. I'd quite like a pawn all the way up on a3. That feels like it should be in my favour. Okay, my opponent goes for that. I'd quite like to keep these pawns. You can have f6 if I can have c3. Because what I really want is that pawn on a2. Because I have a plan here, and it's eventually going to be push a pawn, push a pawn, push a pawn. And it is the a pawn that I am after. So my opponent wants to stop me having connected past pawns, so maybe he's going to play rook b6 or rook c5. Rook c5, rook b7 though. And now what's he going to do? I think rook b6 was more accurate. I can go f6 here. But you know what? I think I can just play king takes and king b3. And what are you going to do about these pawns? Okay, so we can push this h-pawn, but it's just going to be too slow. We'll promote to a queen. Takes. And f6 feels like an accurate move. followed by rook h7, and I pick up the pawn on h6. So it was slightly more accurate for my opponent to play g4 rather than h6, but of course it was game over. Well, that was a little bit disappointing from an entertainment point of view. Queens did come off. But no worries. We will double our efforts to keep the queens on in this game. And it's time to gambit the h-pawn. It's not time to gambit the h-pawn. It's time to put the pawn on e4 on pre, but it's pinned, so he won't take that one either. But never fear, we will get this in at some point. Okay, all I was trying to do was get this outpost for my knight on g5. This slightly unconventional opening seems to have worked out reasonably in my favour. Bring a bishop to c4 here. Eyeing up that juicy f7 square. Maybe now if e6, I can consider queen f3, but not after knight to e5. Getting ready to play d4 here now, I think. And if the knight goes to g4, I can perhaps follow up with f3 and all of that kind of stuff. Knight goes to e3, then queen e2, and the knight's trapped, so the knight has to go all the way back to h6. And, well, there haven't been any gambits so far because we've kind of refused to take each other's pieces, but with c4, I'm going to claim a space advantage here. Maybe I need to go a4 just to underline that in a minute. But first I'm going to develop another piece. But I'm going to ask him where he thinks his king's going. You want to go bishop d7, queen e7 and castle queenside? Fine. Well, look, my pawns are already ready there to meet you. I'm going to claim this looks like quite a promising King's Indian from my point of view. Oh, knight g4. My opponent seems to have hit desperation point, looking for counterplay. But actually it's quite clever. Just going to bring the bishop back, stop the knight jumping in. He wants to go bishop h6. I just want to find a way of breaking through on the queen side. Maybe knight b5 is a move that's going to be in my favour. I'm not 100% certain yet. Even though I like my position, maybe the simplest plan is b5, b6. That's going to guarantee opening up some lines on the queen side, so let's just go for it. b5, b6 it is. Now, if you take... Well, he's got to be careful about a rook landing on a8 now. This isn't the kind of position you see every day, guys. Although, you know, it is the kind of position you see every couple of weeks on Hack Attack, so... Ooh, now c5. That's the gambit that I'm after. So my idea here is that if pawn takes, I'm going to go d6, and otherwise I was eyeing up rook takes a6 followed by c6. And look at the pieces invading now. This feels very, very promising. If bishop takes c1, I'm going to recapture with the queen, eyeing up that pawn on c5. Let's not forget the knight on g4 is still on pre, but we have bigger fish to fry than that for the time being. My opponent is down to less than a minute on the clock. What will he choose to play in this position? Bishop c6 strikes me as quite a sensible move. Bishop e6 check, king b8. And then I'm not sure. Let's take a rook on h8. There isn't any harm in being material up in these positions, I feel. Rook takes d6. Very, very sensible move. Knight comes into d5. Can I still castle here? Anyone got any ideas if I've moved my king? Probably not. Ooh. Knight here, king d7. Oh, there isn't quite an immediate win. Let's just take some more material. We're going to be unusually prosaic in our approach. And yeah, no, I can still legally castle. That's a bonus. Despite all the craziness, we have ended up a rook for 2 pawns up, I believe. My opponent's going for a little bit of counterplay, seems sensible. But now my rook invades the 7th rank. And knight e7 check feels very, very dangerous. So if king b8 or king d8, then queen takes d6. Feels like my opponent overlooked that. King e8. Ooh, where's the finish here? Knight c6 check. Looks like it should be good enough. And that is that.